Okay, we're going to record this session starting now. So I think we got Grotto. And there's Grotto. Wayne Penny's coming up.
Good morning, everybody.
And then Per Mombach is coming up from Germany. All right. Things are working so far.
You bet.
Hey, Grotto,
Hey, RT,
what's happening?
I'm just trying to stay one step ahead of the devil.
All right, all right. We got John Dureco coming in. I like to announce him since I have the power to let people in. Oh my God, Gianluca Wojciechowski. Anybody recognize that? Hope we're not getting Zoom bombed. There we go. Good morning.
Morning.
Start video.
Per, are you there?
Yes, I am.
We can't
Yeah.
see you.
No, there's a good reason for that.
Okay, we got John Diversio. John Diversio.
You got Ralph Feeney. I got the wrong name in there.
Oh, Mark Goodman is in now.
I don't know how to get
Paul
rid of it.
Mueller. And here comes
Good morning.
Mike Cruz.
Audio.
Where's John Gervasio? I don't see him. There he is. Hey, John.
Oh, it's in here.
Oh, here comes Sue Schmitz.
Open it off? What happened? Oh, okay.
What we're doing. Oh, here comes Lauren Mankus. Oh my God.
I told you you would introduce people, Ron.
This is crazy. We got some. Oh my God. And here comes Alan Cox, which I have a feeling might be Catherine Cox. Gianluca. Okay. Oh my God. Here comes Paul Pelsky by iPhone. Hey, Catherine. Hey, Paul.
Everybody,
Paul Pelsky, I see you.
how you doing, RT?
Not too bad. Sue Schmidt, you're in the dark. Or Gary Schmidt, whoever you are.
Ralph Feeney join in. I'm under it. Right here, Ralph Feeney.
Where's Ralph?
Right there. Oh.
I'm using somebody else's computer, so a different name, but
Oh, okay.
There. Mhm.
not Gianluca.
Oh, okay. Because I was wondering, I was afraid we were going to be Zoom bombed because I had never heard that name.
No, it's me. It's Ralph.
Okay, all right. All right, here comes Linda Bellheimer. Gotta hurry.
Here, Priscilla.
Mike Mullins is here. Gary Katz.
Show other people's faces.
Here,
Linda Bellheimer.
So
somebody's leaving.
Can you check the Zoom
Okay.
here for me? I can't get
So here comes just a phone number, so I have no idea who that is. Hey, Gary, now you're in the light. I can see you. Good to see you.
Hi there.
Got the old gang back together here.
Even no audio.
Just a second.
Linda, we can't see you. You hiding?
Go here.
Somebody getting technical
There, how's that?
assistance there.
Where's that? Oh,
Can
good
you
to see
turn
you,
a little
Linda.
bit
That's
more?
better. That's better.
Okay.
Yeah, we
You
definitely want
don't
to see
sound like
everybody.
you picked up a Wisconsin accent.
Motorola. There's Ralph too.
Microphone.
Okay, I think we
I
got a few
unfor-
more. Ralph, I didn't even
Yeah, I
recognize you when
unfortunately
you
have,
came up there.
Say it again?
I said I didn't even recognize you when you came up. It's been
okay, you
been
can
a
see.
while since I've seen you in person.
Oh, yeah.
Uh-uh.
Now we
Now we got
changed.
Elliot Goldman coming in.
Thank you.
Elliot. Elliot
everybody.
Goldman. Good to see you.
Ron, good to see you.
Okay, and
Looking forward to everybody else.
we've got David Yen coming in.
So hopefully we can do a lunch in the fall. That's a good picture.
I think we're going to ask people to mute themselves unless they're not talking. But I mean, if anybody wants to talk, feel free. Anybody have any bon mots or anything they want to say? John Dreco, I see you. Somebody's phone is ringing. It's not mine. So we're up to 29, so we'll take a few more minutes and then we'll see what's going on.
Yeah, there's those or randomness as to, how many people, I think we had like over 100 people like quote opening the emails.
So here comes Mike McClary. All right. David Yan, welcome. Mike, welcome. Don't see you.
We get a tour of everybody's office here.
I know it. I know it. I still have my China motif. I haven't changed that.
Well, at least you have white instead of walnut wood paneling.
Yeah, I do. You can't tell, but I do have a picture of me with, oh shit, I can't think of his name. Who was the Secretary of State during Nixon?
Kissinger?
Kissinger, yeah, it's my picture of Kissinger.
Name dropper.
Yeah, there you go. No, we had a good chat. We fortunately agreed on world geopolitics at that time, so we had a good discussion. Okay, here comes John Kalikowski. I've not seen him in a while. Hey,
Ron, I
John.
think
John Kalinowski. Welcome.
If I unmute, good morning.
Okay.
I'm here, Neil.
And here comes Elaine Biggs. I don't think I know her. Catherine, you know her?
Oh, not that I can think of.
Hello, Elaine.
Maybe it's actually Frank Biggs.
Yeah, she was in the quality organization.
Yeah.
Oh. What group are you in, Elaine?
Yes, I was in several of them, mostly in semiconductors. And
Oh, okay. That's why I didn't know you. Okay, Mark, I think we're pretty good.
yeah.
I think we got 32. I think that's a good count. I'll try and keep an eye on what's going on. So why don't you kick it off with the overall introduction, Mark, and then we can go from there.
So we sent a couple of emails. We have like a 3-part program today. Do you want to put me on, or are you on, or am I on, or?
Yeah, you're on. You can talk.
Oh, okay.
You're good.
So we have a 3-part program. Ron's got an update on Motorola Solutions. Raleigh's going to talk about some patent opportunities, some patent history. Some of the patent history you guys were personally responsible for. And then we'll talk about this kind of new book around Marty Cooper and, the whole process of invention. So with that, as an introduction here, and then most importantly, we'll look forward to seeing everybody in the fall, and we'll actually have an in-person lunch, because I've gotten a couple of feedback from people saying, Zoom's a good idea, but I'd really like to do lunch.
Yeah, I think everybody's zoomed out. And keep in mind, what was that? Oh, okay. Keep in mind, we are going to try and have a fall meeting. And, people have kind of appreciated some of these topics that we brought up. So if you have any idea for topics that you would like to have covered or discussed, or, somebody researched, just let us know. I want to start out with just a brief thing. I think those of you who were with us the last time, my financial planner, George Hemsley, gave an overview on Motorola Solutions. And I was talking to him the other day, and he mentioned that he had listened in on the, earnings call at the end of the first quarter, and that it was one of the most positive earnings call that he had ever heard. So I said, why don't you give me a few tidbits and I'll share them with the people here. So here goes. So Motorola Solutions is just doing gangbusters. And so he says, Motorola Solutions reported earnings on May 6th, and as usual, were excellent. Orders were stronger than any Q1 in history, which led to record sales, operating earnings, and cash flow. The order backlog continued to increase to a record 11.3 billion at the quarter's end. And keep in mind, the annual sales are only like 9 billion. So 11.3 billion backlog's pretty decent. In addition, the company increased their 2021 earnings guidance to $8.75 per share. So right there is like 5% earnings if you got the stock, The company had continued to benefit from both an improved worldwide economy and the 2018 Avigilon acquisition. Avigilon's video security products and expertise, combined with Motorola's scale, worldwide reputation, and government contracts and integration with existing technology and products, has led to accelerating sales and earnings growth. Motorola Solutions will also benefit from the enactment of the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan, which became law in March of 2021. Over the next 3 years, the law will provide money to education facilities, airports, and transit systems, places that Motorola provides security support to. Looking forward, some of these funds will be used to purchase the company's products and services and create an exciting revenue growth potential. With a strong fundamental outlook and annual double-digit dividend increases, the stock continues to be attractive for intermediate and long-term investors. Even with the recent appreciation, we continue to add existing positions when clients have cash available to invest. The short term is anyone's guess, but we encourage investors to think in terms of $9 to $10 per share of future earnings and revenues of ultimately $10 billion a year. They couldn't get Greg Brown to say 10 million, but the analysts were really pushing for it. And earnings of ultimately 10 billion, revenues of ultimately 10 billion per year, both of which we believe will drive the stock price higher. So there you go. So it's kind of good news. It's always good to hear. I don't know about any of you, but I think because of George, I have continued to invest in Motorola. So I do have a few shares, but what I like is besides the growth has been the dividends, like I said, around 5%. So I don't know if I can answer any questions, but I thought I'd just lay that out there for an FYI. So I think with that, if everybody's happy, Mark, would you like me to introduce Rollie, or would you like to, or would you like us both to? Okay, since you're muted and I'm not, I'll start talking. I'll continue talking. First of all, the greatest thing, about our experience at Motorola, of course, was the technology. John, not to negate the sales force, or Catherine, the marketing force. But I mean, I think we all have to admit it was the technology that really drove us. But the second thing was the protection of our technology. And I think that was just awesome that we were able. I think sometimes when we had a bad quarter, we might have collected more on royalties than we did on revenues. I'm not sure about that. But anyway, I mean, we were always protected. We had some of the greatest basic inventions when cellular started. And so during the 70s and 80s, I mean, we were just, just the world leaders in getting the inventions and then protecting the technology. And of course, one of the best guys we had was Rollie, and Rollie just did a tremendous job of working with the engineers and getting their technology well protected. And so I've always had a really strong feeling for Rollie. So I'm glad he volunteered to do this today. And then the other interest I had was so much has gone on in the patent world today, with these guys that are going out and sitting on these patents and doing different things. So I think it's interesting to have Rollie kind of catch us up on what's going on in the world of patent technology. So Mark, unless you have anything, we're going to let.
Ron, I think the only point a couple of people have mentioned, if you haven't muted yourself for Rollie's presentation, it'd be a good idea to mute. We're getting a little bit of feedback. Other than that, Rollie, I think if you share your screen, it should work just fine, so go for it.
Okay, well, thank you guys for the great introduction, and hello everybody. I'm glad to kind of bring you up on my perspective of a little bit of history on what's going on in the patent arena, and then some of the things I've been following. So let me put this up, and let me see. I'm going to catch the show. Okay.
You did it, Rollie. Awesome.
Wow. I had to study. This was the most difficult part. So the topics, the patent law did change significantly. That's the America Invents Act. A little bit of history on our wireless licensing, some toot my own horn, that kind of thing. There were two major wireless standard essential patent acquisitions. Google bought Motorola, Motorola Mobility, and the Nortel patents. There's kind of a quirky thing going on in standards essential patent litigation. COVID-19 vaccine and drug patents they're showing up. Not much litigation yet, but we'll talk a little bit about them. And then this really monumental, I think, copyright case of Google. It was Oracle versus Google. So it went to the Supreme Court. So let's see if I can jump to the next slide. Okay. This will do the AIA pretty quick. Effective 2013, basically absolute novelty, no grace periods. It added what I would call oppositions, which is the European way of doing things. Europe had opposition to a granted patent during the first 9 months. Well, the US had to take that a little further, adding the inter-parties review, covered business method review. Post-grant is 9 months. So just a slide I borrowed from the patent office. There's too many things on it, but basically the post-grant review, I don't think it's being used much. The first 9 months, it's hard to tell unless you're really watching a competitor whether you want to oppose a patent. Inter-party review is being used a lot. It comes up when somebody charges you with infringement or when another company files suit. You can go and challenge the validity of patent claims. Covered business method, that's financial products and services. That's a separate category. You got to be sued or charged with infringement. The one company that got killed there is Technology Trading. Technology Trading had software patents that covered, options, stock trading. They got devastated. So those are the kind of the new things. The big item in this area is the inter-parties review and the how evidence is treated. So right now, that review process is kind of tilted toward the challenger to a patent. And that's because the test is you have to show a patent claim is invalid by the preponderance of the evidence. That's easier than what you do in district court, which is you have to prove it's invalid by clear and convincing evidence. There is a bill submitted by Senator Coons that would correct that and change that to the clear and convincing evidence standard. It's sitting in committee. Nothing's happened to it. Introduced in 2019. All right. So just a brief history of some of the, I think that some of the cellular licensing accomplishments and really impactful items. So the first one in the AMPS licensing, we had the Walzak patent. And that was, kind of a gold mine. It didn't produce monumental royalties, but it did get us an ITC decision against Nokia. We pursued Nokia in the ITC in 1989. A temporary exclusion order was granted based on Walzak patent, the Novak display patent. And I looked again at the finding, and I think it was one of the design patents. I think one of Rudy Krolop's design patents, but that one was a bit of a stretch. So we started there. Then when digital cellular, became prominent, that's where we really stepped up and definitely increased the royalty revenue for Motorola. And like Ron said, I think in some quarters, the royalty revenue saved Motorola. Initially, Motorola pushed licensing at the product level. Now, I think evolving is, and it was very difficult to get suppliers to do this, especially semiconductor suppliers, to step in and defend against a digital cellular patent assertion. But the chipset guys have stepped up, so they're trying to protect their customers. I couldn't get them to do it. I beat them up left and right in this when I was in supply chain contract negotiations. They wouldn't do it, but I think they're doing it more now. The two major acquisitions. So Google bought Motorola Mobility 2011, 12.5 billion. So how much were the patents worth? Well, in 2012, they sold the home business, set-top box, 2.35 billion. Then they went and sold the cellular mobile business, 2014, 2.91 billion. Mobility had 3 billion in cash when they got them. So my gross really rough estimate of the value of the patents is 4.34 billion for 14,600 patents, 6,700 applications. That was a good deal. In looking at Marty's book this morning, I think Marty estimated it at 3.5 billion. So, but it's in the right range. So what would Google do with the Motorola patents? So here's what I think they did. I think they put in place a license agreement that covered their operating system, their Android, and would capture every, probably both standard essential and non-essential patent that Motorola had. I don't know if they had a transfer of money for that license, but they put it in place, and then it didn't matter when they sold the business, because they already had the license, which exhausted all the patents. So that's what they could have done. The other acquisition was for the Nortel Networks patents. So there was a consortium, Apple, Microsoft, Sony, RIM, Ericsson, EMC. I don't know how EMC got in there, but noticeably absent is Google. So here, only 6,000 patents and applications together. So they paid a total of 4.5 billion. So what were really the valuable patents worth in that acquisition? I think if you subtract out what RIM paid, and that was in the news, what Ericsson paid, 3.4 billion left. So I don't know who paid the big portion of that. Maybe Apple, they had a lot of money. So 3.4 billion or 4.5 billion for only 6,000 patents. So this is not quite as good a deal. There was this report on Rockstar, a consortium, which is a non-practicing entity while it existed. And it was out licensing some of these Nortel patents, apparently 4,000 of them. And they were out pursuing everybody, trying to get them to pay royalties until end of 2014, at which point the patents were sold to RPX Corporation. Now, RPX Corporation is an entity that if you join their consortium, they will go and buy a patent that's being asserted against you. So they went and bought the 4,000. Bottom line is there were only 2,000 left, so that would split between all these other companies who are. So it's not clear how much they got out of that, but not quite a good as deal as Google got. So one of the unusual things coming up in standard essential patent litigation is these anti-suit injunctions. So it's like, in this case, Ericsson versus Samsung. Ericsson is still pretty active, chasing down recalcitrant companies like Samsung. Samsung was always the toughest to get to sign anything. So they filed an ITC action. Ericsson did. Ericsson didn't know that Samsung had already filed a suit in China. So Samsung got the Chinese court to issue an anti-suit injunction that enjoins Ericsson from using their parallel suit at the ITC to interfere with the Chinese suit. So this is crazy. So the judge in the Ericsson ITC action, it was made aware of this. The suit was kept secret by Samsung, typical kind of strategy. So Judge Gilstrap pretty much ignored them and issued his own anti-suit injunction. So an anti-suit injunction stating that China should not interfere with the action he was handling, since the issues being litigated were different. So that's just a very quirky thing that comes up in SEP litigation these days. So I find very interesting the patent arena for COVID-19 vaccine and drugs. So so the US now has 3 emergency approvals. You have Pfizer BioNTech mRNA vaccine, messenger RNA technology, Moderna's mRNA technology, and then Johnson & Johnson had a kind of a rough path. They were approved, then they got knocked out for a short time, about 2 weeks, then it was lifted. So they had this unfortunate side effect where younger women, under 50, let's say, could encounter, this issue with blood clotting. The FDA went ahead and lifted this pause on their approval, feeling that the benefits outweighed the risk. One other vaccine that's in the news is AstraZeneca, Oxford University. Not approved in the US, but approved in a number of other countries. And the two drugs that kind of showed up as really having benefit, the Regeneron drug cocktail. I mean, it makes a difference. Anybody getting COVID should try to get these drugs. Remdesivir by Gilead, it makes a difference. The US government actually purchased doses of remdesivir and doled it out to the states. So if you don't know about it, you may not get the benefit of it. So I think Moderna is probably the interesting test case. They have a lot on their website. They issued this statement that I think they kind of started the ball rolling, that they will not enforce their COVID-19 related patents against anybody making vaccines to combat the pandemic. They also offered the license. So, I mean, that's very helpful to the industry. If you have the capability to make a vaccine, you could go there and maybe get a license. Moderna did publish their patents, at least those that cover their vaccine. They claim to have, around 240 granted patents, maybe 500 total. So they're published patents held in the name of Moderna TX Inc. There's 7 of them. They stated that these patents cover the mRNA 1273 COVID-19 vaccine that they're now distributing and selling. So one of the patents, so just take a quick look at one, 10.702.600. It recently granted. I think the specification has about close to 1,000 pages. I mean, it's the longest patent I've ever seen. So their discovery, which they're not alone. I mean, others have apparently found a way to use this messenger RNA technology, but they combine the mRNA technology with lipid nanoparticles to make vaccines. They actually have 11 different vaccines in process. So really important to them is to get full approval of their COVID-19 vaccine. If they get that, I think that kind of paves the way for them to get, their other vaccines approved. Maybe for the Zika virus, for Ebola. I'm not, I didn't list the 11, but there's other things. So I think what's interesting is their claim 1 of the 600 patent, which I think is very broad, basically says using mRNA comprising an open reading frame encoding a beta coronavirus S protein. So they isolate this S protein and it's formulated in a lipid nanoparticle. I think that's pretty broad. So if there are patent wars, which there aren't, it's probably not going to happen. They've got a great claim there. So not to let others get outdone, I'll do Microsoft. They jumped in with a pledge against asserting their patents. And it's the Open COVID pledge. Basically, it says, we want to assert our patents against, diagnosing, preventing, developing vaccines. And it only lasts until January 1, 2023. So they've put all the typical caveats on it. Oops, sorry, it moved on me. Let's see where it moved. Did I jump too far ahead? Let's see, I may have to go back. Let me just jump quick. No, I don't think I can go back. I have to get back here somehow. Where am I?
Try a left arrow, Raleigh, left arrow.
Oh, just go back, yes. Thank you. I'm going back. Nope, that's all, sorry. Let me see. Oh, why is where'd my screen go? Sorry about this. Okay, let's see. We can jump back to the actual presentation. All right. So what, to the extent there's any litigation and licensing, there's not much. Moderna, does that show up on the screen? Let me stop sharing and start sharing again. Okay. Back. Sorry. Okay, COVID-19 licensing. So who's out there licensing and what kind of licenses may some people need? I'm gonna patent pledge. So from the past, way past, we have, there goes my brick phone. Wow. We have compulsory licensing. I guess I skipped one. So there were only a couple of potential litigations going on. Moderna needs a license from one of its licensees. They lost their license. They tried to kill the patents. They'll have to address that. And Moderna and Pfizer were chased by a company who has a fluorescent protein used in drug development, but they've got a losing case because when you're developing drugs, you got to pass on infringement. So, but what is really going on in the world is this, you've probably heard of it. I call it, there's a Biden patent waiver where the US government wants to waive patents, which I think is ridiculous. There is compulsory licensing, which is a holdover from, going way back to when we were doing local manufacture in Brazil. The threat in Brazil was that if you don't license your patents, we'll issue a compulsory license to another entity. A lot of developing countries had that. It's a way to make sure that their local industries get access to patents. It didn't work. It's not working for anybody now either. The Russian government actually granted a compulsory license to a Russian generic company to use Gilead's patents for remdesivir. Subject to fair compensation, it's only a 1-year license. But I guess what it does is there was a standstill between the Russian company and Gilead. They couldn't come to terms. It kind of kicks them in the butt, gets them moving. As far as companies licensing their own stuff to enhance the delivery of vaccines, well, Moderna offered the license. They talked about having their vaccine manufactured at a Nexus plant in Wisconsin. I don't think that happened, but oh, there it goes. But Sanofi is performing fill and pack for Moderna, Pfizer, and Johnson & Johnson. That's the last step in getting your vaccine out. So there's a few things going on in the licensing area. Oh, there we go. So the recent Supreme Court case, this is really very interesting. Oracle and Google have been fighting for over 10 years. Oracle tried patents. It didn't work. They fell out of the case, but they centered on copyright protection for the Java APIs and Java SE. They have been litigating in court for more. I'm not sure if the whole 10 years has been spent on copyrights, but at least 5, 6, 7 have. They have gotten several decisions in the district courts, and on appeal, The district court threw it out, sent it back. So this appeal was taken to the Supreme Court. These guys really are mad at each other. I saw them on a seminar. They're not happy with each other. It turns out that at the Supreme Court, Google won. So Google was arguing that, only two questions were presented, by the Supreme Court for the litigation. But Google's arguing APIs aren't copyrightable, they're ideas. And if they are, Google said, our use is a fair use. Well, the Supreme Court decided the case just a few weeks ago on April 6th, found in Google's favor that their use of the Oracle's, I guess they call it their API code, their interface code. The court called it declaring code versus the real substance, the implementing code, which is Java SE. They found that Google's use of that was a fair use. Okay, and basically their words, they're up there. Google's copying of the API. They copied the entire API to implement a user interface, taking only what was needed to allow users, developers, skilled developers in Java to put their accrued talents, to work in a new and transformative program constituted a fair use as a matter of law. Boy, Oracle got really slam dunked. So I think what this shows is that copyright protection is really narrower for factual works. I guess as the court termed it, like functional. Software is functional, it's factual. They found that the Java API code was declaring code, that it's basically some code to allow you to execute the real code, the implementing code that was full of basically intertwined with ideas and software. So I think what this means is that copyright protection for software is not that strong. So don't put all your software protection in the form of copyright. I mean, it really was a last resort probably for Oracle. I mean, most software is protected, trade secret, don't give it to anybody. And license agreement, of course, there was a license agreement here with very restrictive terms, but that's typically what everybody does. Patent if you can, but patents is kind of a slippery slope. Software patents just aren't that good. They can get killed in inter partes review, and then copyright. As have a backstop, maybe patent and copyright, user license agreement, but copyright certainly isn't that valuable for software anymore. I think probably the major thing to come out of the last couple of years is the use of this messenger RNA technology to develop vaccines. I think that is a really monumental advancement in health technology that has a lot of potential, obviously, because it works. And if Moderna and Pfizer and BioNTech get full approval of their vaccines, it will be the way forward for developing vaccines. I mean, it's just an awesome, quick way to develop a vaccine. I think that's it. Anybody have any questions?
Well, what's your view on the fact that there is a proposal that the Moderna Pfizer give up their patent rights to other countries to accelerate their receipt of vaccines?
I probably went over that a little too quick. It doesn't work. Basically, a waiver, as Biden is proposing, compulsory license, it simply doesn't work. In order to develop a vaccine, you need the know-how. Okay, I've always been a proponent of protection of know-how. And I preach that all through my career. Know-how is the valuable part. There's no way to force a company to give up its know-how. So, I mean, if I'm counsel for Moderna, I'd say, don't worry. Good luck if they think they can do it. We're not going to help them. This is internal advice because we don't have to. Okay, now that kind of blows off the interest of the health of the world's people. I mean, where you might want to help, but you just can't take the patents and create a vaccine. You need a lot more. Like in the case of Russia, they had this generic company that already was making medicines and maybe even vaccines. Now, if you have a company like that in your country, and you could get them a license, it might help, but still, they need a technology license agreement that transfers know-how as well as the right to the patents.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So
Hey,
I think all these
Rollie,
patent waivers,
Rollie,
patent non-asserts just aren't going to work.
Okay, Rollie, I had a question you didn't touch on. What was going on about 10 years ago? Were they called patent squatters? The people were just going out and getting a hold of patents and then going back and trying to sue anybody that was using it. And did that get shut down, or whatever happened with that?
Well, I think there's still some of that going on where they're called NPEs, non-practicing entities.
Yeah.
Acquire patents and then sue people. The additional weaponry you have in your arsenal is this inter-parties review. So what the target would do, what the company that's being sued would go right to inter-parties review and try to invalidate that patent. Now, what that does for you, it creates a record as to certain prior art, and that prior art and that finding, if they find, let's say there's 10 claims, if they find the broadest claim 1 is invalid, then and the rest are all dependent, pretty much that patent's gone. So I think what has helped against NPEs is that type of inter-parties review that can limit the scope of the litigation. Now that didn't, I mean, just by way of example, that didn't totally help Google, because there was a company that sued them saying that their Android software infringed or some feature of it infringed, and the company actually won. But it wasn't a big verdict. I mean, they maybe around 150 million. So, I mean, they can win, but we made it tougher. Another thing you can do is join the RPX consortium and promote that RPX buy that patent, take it out of play. So I don't know. I really haven't looked to see how NPEs are doing these days, but I think Ericsson's doing better than NPEs.
Good. All right. Hey, you mentioned when you were talking about one of the open deals that Microsoft was one of the first to approve it.
Yes.
What did I thought you were talking about some of the COVID technology. What role was Microsoft playing?
They're not playing any role that I know of, but not to be left out. I mean, we Microsoft, we're an honorable company. We won't pursue anybody making vaccines. And we'll sign this pledge, until that lasts until 2023, that we won't assert our patents against, the COVID-19 pandemic and drugs and diagnostics preventing, containing, treating COVID-19. So I think they just wanted to look good as a corporate entity.
Okay. So go ahead.
Well, there is a viewpoint that the patent system is broken. What's your view on why the patent system is no longer solving the problem it was intended to solve, which is to protect the rights of specific inventors?
So I guess from the point of view of the patent holders, is that your viewpoint? Or the patent people trying to get patents? I think take it from both ways. So from the patent holder point of view,
I think of society in general. Why we have a patent system, and who is it supposed to protect? And at the moment, it's trolls and huge companies, and the whatever happened to protecting the inventor.
Yeah, that is a concern. Yeah. So the individual inventor is probably priced out of really enforcing his patents. I mean, if I were a sole inventor and I had this patent on display technology and maybe an icon that Apple happened to get in their display and I pursued them, I think they would just fight me until I ran out of money. So the sole inventor has a really tough road to go after the big guy. The big guy can just outlast them, basically get him to settle at some point because he's ran out of money. So that's always been a problem in the patent system. I guess as far as patents helping the public interest, we see, I mean, the pandemic was such an unusual happening that we see lots of companies, Moderna, I think, took a really good approach. They said, okay, we're not going to pursue people with our patents. Plus, we'll license them. So I think that's the right position to take from a socially responsible company. But the sole inventor has a tough road to hoe.
So I think that's a good segue to our next segment, Ron.
Okay.
Unless because I mean, I think
no, I did have one more question. It kind of tied into his last answer on Marty's question. What about Elon Musk that goes ahead and has great technology and then just says it's going to be open? Or is that a real deal or not?
Show me the money. I'd like to see that in writing. I don't know what he means by open, but I guess you can take this open COVID pledge, and if I've signed that, it would be open. I mean, his technology would then be open for the purpose of the pandemic. If he means that, I think that's great. I mean, he can make that commitment without losing a lot of money. If he says his interface is going to be open, that's great too. He takes pretty careful control of the software and rips it away from you. You try to sell his car and he'll take the software out, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah, I hadn't heard that, but.
Oh yeah.
If you have a big enough lead, you don't care.
Yeah, I think that's what he had there. But boy, there's a lot of people coming in now.
I think the adventure of what Rollie's talking about a little bit here is know-how too. I mean, you can give people kind of an outline, but if you're not there relative to the know-how, then you're not going to be able to implement it anyhow.
Yeah.
He also has a huge battery factory that he wants to sell out.
Yes, he has a lot of know-how. I agree with him, Mark and Grota.
Yeah, the question is, what's he going to charge for the know-how? I'll give you access to my patent, but my know-how is going to cost you a little bit. So, it's an interesting adventure that way. Well,
Yep.
Rollie, I wanted to thank you. I think that you've really given us an in-depth look at a lot of different opportunities that are going on here. We really don't have a total time frame for this call, so Marty didn't know whether you were going to come along here or not. But Ron had asked that I do a short summary of the book, and then we'll kind of kick it off here. Is that okay with you, Ron?
Oh, that's great. As long as it's okay with Marty, let you speak and see what he thinks.
Well, I actually had about a 5-sentence summary of the book, and Marty had noted on an earlier email that his book was a personal story anyhow. I don't think it's particularly intended to be like the in-depth history, but there's really 3 parts to this book, and we'll kind of kick it off because I'm kind of interested in the invention process here. One of the things that you brought up at Rollie and everybody's talked about is this whole movement from, the inventor being an individual to the inventor being an entity. And, is there room anymore for, quote, the individual, inventor? And I was thinking a little bit, Marty, off of, what you were talking about with Marconi. And certainly if we go back into the end of the 19th century, you had the Tesla versus Edison adventure. But anyhow, talking about Marty's books, there was really 3 parts to this book. The first part was, Marty's journey from being the child of immigrants, through high school and college, and kind of what shaped him. And you can certainly comment on, my overview here, Marty. The second part was Marty joining Motorola and becoming the advocate for the cellular portable. And I think, there's a lot of discussion on invention here. And one of my takeaways, Marty, is that on one level, you were the focal point for the innovation, but the success was dependent on the entire Motorola team. And that had to do with the top management, applied research, legal, the business teams. So, the success here was, everybody working together, with the undercurrent of, the AT&T monopoly, which is a whole nother discussion. And then I think the last part was, Marty's view of the impact and the future of wireless. And, it's kind of funny because those of us who were in the middle of this, I'm not sure we were really thinking about the impact or the future of wireless other than how are we going to get through the next quarter. But with that, I'll kind of leave it with either if you want to comment, Marty, or if anybody else wants to talk about their impressions from the book.
Well, I'm grateful that you read the book. So thank you very much for that much. But I'd love to hear some more comments, and then I'd be happy to respond.
Marty, I've read the book too, and I was amazed at how succinctly you summarized the thought of your invention and how fast Linder and his team actually put that together. One of my first jobs when I joined Motorola in Linder's group was to maintain those 2 things and keep them going. And it was so neat to read the story of how fast that came together. And I applaud you because every engine needs a spark plug, and you were the spark plug that got that engine going.
Well, I appreciate that comment. There were so many different things that I tried to get across in the book that I may have muddled them. But with regard to the comment I made earlier about did we predict what was going to happen with the phone in the future? And there were 2 issues. Number one is that we understood the importance of personal communications, of having a portable, because the marketplace had taught us that we had observed what happened when we put a phone in the hands of a policeman or in the hands of an airport attendant and the difference between calling a place and calling a person. And I hope we got that message across, because whereas we could never have predicted the digital camera, the large scale integrated circuits, none of those things had been invented at that. There was no internet. But the joke we told is that someday when you were born, you would be assigned a phone number. And if you didn't answer the phone, you had died. So we knew this was going to be a big deal. But the other point that I tried to get across from a personal point of view was that a large part of inventing and creating new products has to do with self-confidence, with really understanding both the technology and the market. And that doesn't come without a lot of experience. And so I was kind of, I hope I made it clear that I don't think I did anything particularly unique, because I was surrounded by a bunch of geniuses, including some of the people on the planet. So, but I was lucky enough to get in a situation where I just kept moving from one opportunity to another. And I guess I was good at jumping in on the opportunities. So if you look at it, it's kind of weird. Don't you think that the first thing I did when I joined Motorola was I looked at this mechanical gadget that was a selector that all it did was ring a bell on after a code, but it was part of the telephone business. And then I got into the first rural telephone, and then IMTS, and then paging, and each one being having a more depth of people depending upon communications. So the cell phone technology was just a follow-on to all of this. But the point somebody made earlier was the most important one, is that I was immersed in two wonderful situations. One is the ability of the management to allow failure, and in fact, encourage people to reach out. I don't know if you've all experienced that. And I guess I forgot what the other one was. But I think I've expressed that in the best way I can.
I'd be curious. I was at corporate in the early, and I was there starting in the early 80s. And I'd be curious, and Marty, in hearing what kind of support you had from Bob Galvin. And I always found him to be somebody who embraced new ideas. And just what in the early days when you came to him with something as far-fetched, perhaps, as the idea of what cellular was, because I heard Jim Cale once say that, you know, maybe by the turn of the century, we might have 1 million subscribers worldwide. And a lot of people thought like maybe that might even be a stretch, you know, with the cellular thing. And just kind of curious what kind of support you might have had, you know, from Bob, and perhaps, you know, maybe at a different time, a different place, a different company. What do you think might have happened?
Well, let me say, first of all, the 30,000 feet viewpoint is that I thought, or I do now, think that Bob Galvin was wonderful, that he bet the company over a period of years. We spent something like $100 million on developing cellular technology without ever getting a nickel out of it. and have a leader taking that kind of a risk is quite extraordinary. And that's why I repeated it any number of times, and I repeat it now, about how lucky we were to be in that environment. So it turns out that my relationship with Bob during the cellular times was very distant. I used to fly in his airplane quite frequently as we went around the country exercising the technology roadmap. And my closest relationship with Bob at that time is when he kept warning me not to drop peanuts on the floor of the airplane because it was so hard to vacuum the dirt up. But in his later years, I did become very friendly with him. We skied together. We talked about things, and the fact that Bob was a profound guy. He did not like the idea of AT&T muscling people around. I think he saw the vision. I think he listened very much to John Mitchell and Bill Weiss. And I have enormous respect for what Bob did then and what his viewpoints were. It is interesting that at the time, I never gave him enough credit for understanding the technology because he really didn't. And it was, I hate to say this as an engineer, it wasn't important that he understood the technology. He trusted the team. He believed what we told him. Of course, we were right. But I do want to correct one thing you said, Gary, about the predictions, because that million number came from AT&T's hiring of McKinsey. They hired McKinsey and they asked him to make a prediction of how many car phones there were going to be in the future. And you're right, McKinsey did come up with a number like 900,000 was going to be the maximum number of phones ever produced in the world. And it turns out they were right. The maximum number of car phones that ever existed was of the order of 1 million. I already told you what our emotional prediction was. Everybody was going to have one. We just believed that. So the more practical manifestation of that is when Jim Cale came up with a plan. It has to be more than a dream. We're trying to persuade the management to make a big investment. And so Jim and his guys came up with a plan, and I took a look at this thing and made a judgment that if I was running Motorola, I would not invest in that business. So I asked Jim to take all the numbers and double them, and that's what we presented to management. Very intelligent and thoughtful way of making a prediction. But overall, we really believed in the concept of portability. We watched, I mentioned people in the airport before. One of the things that we did was make a holster, beautiful leather holster for portable two-way radios. And we John Mitchell and I walked through the airport, and he pointed out to me that people were running up and down the aisles of the airport, standing at the airport, and they were all holding the phone in their hands. Was that prescient or what? I mean, don't you watch people crossing the street now looking at their cell phones? They're absolutely idiotic. But we're all doing that. We're all walking around with the cell phones in our hands. Yeah. So it's a lot of what we call invention is really observing the behavior of people and trying to make people more efficient.
I'll never forget one of my first trips to Hong Kong and how, as a status symbol, you had the brick phone.
Yep.
You go into a hotel and everybody would have the brick phone sitting on a table throughout the hotel. and they just have the little green light blinking, and that was your status. You know, that was showing that you were somebody.
What was interesting is I would go out with the our local sales guys, and there'd be like 6 or 7 of them sitting at the table, just like you said, with their phones up. And if one of the phones rang, the guys could tell the difference in the ringers. I don't know how, but they all knew the difference. So, but that was always impressive. But the deal always was the difference between Hong Kong and the U.S. Where over there they were ready to be, a little more, out about it. Whereas in the U.S., the people wanted to be more, I think reserved or quiet about it.
Discreet, yeah. Over there, yeah, definitely, it was a sign of status to have that phone. A brick phone was great.
Well, I wonder if anybody has an impression about one point that I made in the book, or maybe I didn't make it very clearly, so I'll try it now. That I believe that access to the internet, personal communications, is now is essential for human existence as water, food, and shelter. That in fact, if to give one example, if a student today does not have access to the internet, they will end up growing up less smart, less capable, and to say in an exaggerated way, a different class of person than somebody who has access to the internet. Somebody who has not had access will have fewer connections in their brain. They will be less smart than somebody who. So, and the important part of that is that in the United States, one of the most advanced cultures in the world, half of our students do not have access to the internet. So, anybody have any? I would hope somebody would argue with me about that.
I'll tell you, I wouldn't argue with you, because I read those numbers about Korea and how such a high percentage has access to high-speed internet. And I don't want to get political, but I thought the fact that they're including access to broadband as part of the infrastructure bill, I think that makes a lot of sense too, because I think that's as important as water, electricity, roads, and so on. That's my comment.
Yeah, one of the nonprofit boards that I'm on, I live in Barrington here, and we had an initiative where our superintendent made sure that everybody had a laptop beginning in high school, and it's now gone through the entire school system. But the irony would be that you'd have students, because we also embrace the Carpentersville area where a lot of students do not have access to the internet. And but anyway, this one particular board I'm on, we are helping families get the internet and working with Comcast and AT&T to make sure that they do have, so that they do have not just a laptop, but when they go home, they can study from home, so that they do have the internet available to them.
Well, Gary, that's an interesting comment, and I do believe that there are a lot of people that are recognizing the importance of communications and education. I think one of the biggest problems we have is that, I mentioned 50% of the students don't have internet, and there are 2 reasons. One is they can't afford it, and 2 is that their coverage doesn't exist. And the message you get from that is that the focus of the carriers now is 5G. Let's push this technology. Let's use millimeter wave. My belief is that if you designed a system, a cellular system focused on education, focused on the 2 things that we care about, which are coverage and cost. We want coverage everywhere, including the rural areas. Right now, we don't have coverage even in suburban areas. Don't you guys have? I know you're all sensitive to this. There are places where there is no coverage right in our urban and suburban areas. So those are the two things: coverage and cost. And I believe that if you created a system that was focused on those two things, that you could have a cost of the order of $5 to $10 a month, and that you could cover like 99% of the country. And somehow I have gotten zero resonance to that. Everybody is so hung up on 5G, which I don't object to. I think 5G's got some very useful attributes, but giving the carriers more money to keep prosecuting this industrial application is not going to solve the problem of getting internet access to all of our students. I think we have a fundamental problem there, and getting the politicians to understand that is really hard. And if you want to know what I think the real problem politically is, I think there's one technical person in Congress. All the rest of them were lawyers and politicians. And how can you explain smart antennas to a politician?
I think one of the interesting things in reading your book was that, I don't, Motorola in some ways, reached out and spent the $100 million and took the risk. At the other hand, in some ways, Motorola didn't have any choice, because back in the 1970s, AT&T looked at the whole business wireless that Motorola was in, as Motorola was in it because of the consent decree in the 50s. And if Motorola, it was AT&T's plan to actually take over that, business, wireless business. And I don't think anybody had the idea back then that, wireless would be ubiquitous, that you could get it anywhere. And I think that, looking back over the last 30 or 40 years of watching this happen, is a surprise that, yes, all the spectrum has opened up based upon the, some of the analysis you've talked about, but I don't think anybody ever thought about it. And, I think Motorola always struggled with the idea when communications moved from being business communications to being personal.
Well, you really did read the book. I appreciate that. Did you extract from that? Well, of course you knew it already, that cellular almost didn't happen. Just imagine, that I mentioned in the book that by the end of 1973, that we had pretty much won the battle. That was a little bit of an exaggeration, because the Bell system kept fighting even into the early 1980s. They still wanted to have a monopoly, and they were still focused on the car telephone. And Joel Engel and Dick Frankiel today think that the portable was just a miniaturization and was not very important at all. But cellular, as we know it today, almost didn't happen. If the FCC had just shifted a little bit and let AT&T have a monopoly, it would have taken, my guess is, at least another 10 years before we had a handheld device.
Yeah, I mean, the Bell Systems pursuit of their monopoly was kind of intriguing.
Yeah, you get the feeling that AT&T and Verizon think that they're still the Bell system?
Well, it was kind of interesting because, I got into cellular after you left. And, I was kind of working around some of the business strategy. And there was always this dichotomy between focusing on the bell companies who you kind of felt like really had the technical expertise to do whatever. And, the non-wire lines, the RCCs, which you also touch upon in the book, who, had a position in the whole adventure. But, in some ways you watch the Bell system, especially you watch the Verizon's, and, the heritage is still there.
Yeah. Yeah, they are still behaving like that they can tell us what we want, is my characterization of a monopoly, in contrast with what you were just describing about trying to get into your customer's head and figure out what he really wants and needs.
Hey, Marty, I liked your story in the book. I kind of pick and chose parts, but I caught this one where Bob Galvin went to meet with President Reagan and Vice President Bush. They both made phone calls. And the next thing Reagan did was he told his associates to go talk to the FCC and get this moving. I think that really helped.
Yeah, well, there's no question about it. But of course, by that was 1982. By that time, I'm sure he accelerated by the order of months or years. But by that time, the die was cast. We were going to have portables. We were stalling. By that, at the beginning, we were pushing portables and trying to get people to do things. But by the late 1970s, the Bell system was ready to go, and we kept making changes and putting new features into this thing so we could stall the process because we weren't ready. We couldn't produce them or make a reproducible, cost-effective portable. So we were stalling at that time. But Reagan's comment came just at about the right time where we were ready to actually produce a portable. And as you all know, that the first portables were not very effective. The coverage was not enough, adequate to have real portables, but at least there were portables there.
Of course, it was analog and it was tower to tower. And of course, the phones were almost $2,000 and it was $2 a minute to use. I'd be curious, Marty, too, when you step back and at the time when you heard about Iridium, what did you think that was all about? Did you think that was a promising idea, or did you think that was doomed?
Well, it's funny you say that. I had enormous respect for John Mitchell. John Mitchell was my mentor for most of my years at Motorola. And if John said that this thing was going to work, I assumed that it was going to work. But I never quite understood what the advantage of satellite communications is going to be in the really dense areas. And if you think about it, from the very beginning, we assumed that there would be coverage everywhere. So I guess I was not objective. If I was objective, I would have seriously questioned the value of Iridium.
Okay, Marco.
It would be interesting, to contrast the John Mitchell as described in the Marty Cooper book versus the John Mitchell that's described in the Bloom book that I think is called Eccentric Orbits, which is talking about Iridium. That kind of gives two contrasting views of John Mitchell, but that's kind of a side note here.
Well, could you summarize what they said?
What Bloom said? Well, I mean, Bloom's observation when he was writing about Iridium is he felt like, Mitchell had kind of taken hold of it and, had almost, kept it going and wasn't particularly sensitive probably to some of the logical concerns. And I think there was always this interesting dynamic. I saw this at Motorola and in a number of different ventures, just not the cell phone business. There was always a sense that says, if I put it out there, they will come. And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't.
Well, that's very helpful. Thank you. I'm going to look that up. The most important thing that I learned from John Mitchell and from Bill Weiss and Bob Gavin is the concept of objectivity. Take your personality out of a decision, take your emotions out of a decision, look at the facts, understand what the reality is. And I think you're right. I think that book is right, that somehow at some point, John had lost his objectivity. He was so wrapped up in this thing. He had so much of his reputation and his effort. I mean, he managed to pull together something like $8 billion to build that system. So I'm not sure I could be very objective if I had an $8 billion overhang on me. So he did get, and I know that some of you knew Ed Staiano. At some point, Ed Staiano, who was running Iridium, came to John and said, John, I'm not sure this thing is going to work. And John felt like he had been betrayed. So he was getting emotional, and that's a big mistake.
Yeah, a lot of that's highlighted in the Bloom book, and it's interesting how, like I said, in two different pictures relative to that. I think the other challenge that happened, and I was talking to a friend of mine who was actually in Brazil in the 1990s, and he made the comment how the whole wireless adventure changed from being business wireless to personal wireless. And I think that, everybody kind of struggled with the that change because all of a sudden the whole personal wireless thing had a significant impact on the volume, but on the other hand, had an impact on profits, etc.
Yeah.
Okay. So Mark, I think we've kind of reached the end here.
Yep, I agree with you.
Okay. And, let me go first here. Rollie, I want to thank you. I really appreciate it. Learned a lot and glad to hear you're still on top of it. Marty, appreciate you joining us for the conversation. And I wanted to comment that a couple weeks ago, I saw the presentation at IIT for you and Arlene, and I thought it was very impressive. So congratulations there. And thank everybody that showed up today. It's good to see some new faces and everything. And hopefully the next time we're in person. So Marco, you can take it out.
We'll see everybody in October or November or whenever it works. And thanks everybody for showing up.
All right.
Thanks a lot
Thank you for organizing it. That was very helpful.
Yeah, thanks for hosting.
Very informative.
Great session, yeah.
And quite
Thank you
frankly,
so
Marty,
much.
working in other companies now, because my husband's Frank Biggs and he worked in cellular for many years, and I'm out there working and I'm working for a different company, and I really miss Motorola's leadership. It's vision and it's decision making and risk taking. And I don't see that in this other company, many companies I've been at. So I treasure it because that was really leaders. And I think about the leaders many times, what would they do? And when I'm working in an executive position in another company. So thank you for your example, because you inspire other people.
Well, thanks for your kind words.
Yeah,
It's true. I really learned a lot from many, many people, and it's been helpful. So thank you for sharing it.
All right.
Bye now. Take
Okay.
care.
Chuck,
Best
Mark,
wishes to all.
Chuck, Mark, good to see you or hear you. Bill Homer, everybody. All right, I'm gonna take everybody out here, so take care.
Have a good summer. We'll see you guys in the fall.
All right, great.
Bye.
Wonderful to see you guys and to see how young you all are.
Oh, yeah, right. And keep in mind, we got a recording of this if anybody wants to see it. So,
Yeah, I'll send me the link and I'll send it out to everybody.
sounds great.
All right, bye-bye.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.